Ma'am, I need to see identification. Now.
What suspicious behavior did I engage in?
Don't make this difficult. ID or you're going in cuffs.
Here's my FBI ID, officer, and you need reasonable suspicion.
I don't need a law degree from you. Hands behind your back.
Officer Stephen Howard had been with the Dallas Police Department for 9 years when he made a decision that would cost him everything: his career, his pension, his reputation, and cost the city $3.1 million. He was 34 years old when he approached a woman sitting quietly on a park bench, watching her daughter play. The woman was Special Agent Jade Ross, a 12-year FBI veteran who had spent her entire career investigating officers exactly like him. What Howard did next, fabricating a complaint, handcuffing her in front of her child, arresting her for asserting her constitutional rights, would become viral evidence of his own professional execution. He never noticed that the woman he was profiling wasn't afraid. She was documenting. Special Agent Jade Ross had built her career on holding the powerful accountable. For 12 years, she had worked in the FBI's Civil Rights Division, investigating police misconduct across 3 states. Her cases had resulted in departmental reforms, officer terminations, and federal prosecutions. She was meticulous, thorough, and uncompromising when it came to constitutional violations. But on October 26, 2024, none of that mattered. At Riverside Park in suburban Dallas, Jade sat on a weathered bench watching her 7-year-old daughter Wendy swing higher and higher, her laughter cutting through the autumn afternoon. It was a rare Saturday off, a moment of normalcy in a demanding career that often kept her working late into the night. Other families dotted the park, children on slides, parents pushing strollers, a couple walking their dog along the tree-lined path. Jade checked her phone briefly, responding to a work email, then looked up to find a police officer standing directly in front of her, blocking her view of the playground. "Ma'am, I need to see identification. Now." Officer Stephen Howard's hand rested on his duty belt, his posture rigid and commanding. Behind him, his partner, Officer James Edmond, had positioned himself near the park entrance, effectively cutting off any exit from the area. Jade's trained eyes immediately assessed the situation. 2 officers. No emergency. No visible incident. Just her, sitting on a bench. "I'm here with my daughter," she said calmly, gesturing toward Wendy on the swings. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We received a complaint about a suspicious person loitering near children." Howard's voice carried the weight of assumed authority. "That's you. ID. Now." 12 years of investigating police misconduct had taught Jade to recognize racial profiling within seconds. She had been sitting on this bench for less than 15 minutes, doing nothing but watching her daughter play. She had spoken to no one, approached no one, done nothing that could remotely be considered suspicious. "What specific suspicious behavior did I engage in?" she asked, keeping her voice measured and professional. The question visibly irritated Howard. His jaw tightened, his stance shifted. "Don't make this difficult. ID or you're going in cuffs." What neither officer knew was that they were speaking to someone who had prosecuted dozens of cases exactly like this one, and won every single time. Jade Ross knew the law better than most attorneys. Terry versus Ohio. Reasonable articulable suspicion. The Fourth Amendment protects against unlawful search and seizure. She had testified about these concepts in federal courtrooms, had written policy recommendations based on them, and had trained other agents on how to recognize their violation. Now she was living it. Under Terry v. Ohio, you need reasonable articulable suspicion of criminal activity to detain me, she stated, her tone calm but firm. Sitting on a public bench isn't suspicious behavior. I'm not obligated to provide identification without that legal standard being met. Officer Howard's face flushed red. In his 9 years on the force, he had grown accustomed to immediate compliance. People didn't quote case law at him. They didn't challenge his authority. They certainly didn't do it with the kind of quiet confidence this woman was displaying. "You think you're a lawyer?" he snapped. "I don't need a law degree from you. I've got a complaint, and you match the description." Jade felt her heartbeat steady despite the anger building inside her. This was the moment that mattered. The moment that would define everything that followed. "What description?" she pressed. Howard's response came without hesitation, the words escaping before his brain could filter them. A black female in the park. There it was. The statement she had heard in depositions, in internal affairs, interviews, in federal courtrooms. The statement that had ended careers, cost departments millions, resulted in policy reforms across entire states. But this time, it wasn't coming from a recording or a transcript. It was being directed at her while her daughter played 20 feet away. Jade's voice remained steady. "That's not a description, officer. That's a demographic. There are at least 4 other black women in this park right now. What specific behavior made me suspicious?" She watched Howard's jaw clench, watched the muscles in his neck tighten. His partner, Edmund, shifted his weight uncomfortably. The younger officer's body language screamed discomfort. He knew this stop was wrong, knew the situation was deteriorating, but he wasn't going to intervene against his senior partner. "I'm done talking," Howard declared. "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for obstruction." Jade's mind moved through her options, with the precision of someone trained to make split-second decisions under pressure. She could identify herself as FBI immediately, show her credentials, end this confrontation with 3 words: "I'm federal law enforcement." But something made her pause. This officer needed to finish what he was starting. She needed the complete record. Not for herself, she could handle this, but for her daughter, who was watching from the playground. For every other black mother who found herself in this exact position without a federal badge to protect them. For every person who had ever been told they were suspicious for simply existing in public space. The documentation had to be complete. "I'm not resisting," she said clearly, knowing Howard's body camera was recording every word. "But I'm asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. This detention is unconstitutional." Howard grabbed her wrist, forcing it behind her back with unnecessary roughness. The physical control felt excessive, performative, another officer asserting dominance he assumed he possessed. From the playground, Wendy had stopped swinging. At 7 years old, she understood that something was very wrong. Her mother, the woman who chased bad guys for a living, was being handcuffed by police officers. Jade turned her head, making eye contact with her daughter. Then she gave the smallest nod, the silent communication they had practiced during safety drills, during conversations about what to do if Mommy was ever in danger during her work. "Stay calm. Mommy's okay. This is going to be a lesson." The metal handcuffs clicked shut around Jade's wrists. The sound was final, definitive. In that moment, Officer Stephen Howard believed he had won. He radioed dispatch with satisfaction in his voice. 1 in custody, black female, obstruction, and disorderly conduct. What he didn't know was that he had just documented his own professional destruction. Every word, every action, every constitutional violation, all of it captured on the body camera strapped to his chest. The back seat of a patrol car smells like fear and disinfectant. Jade sat in silence, her hands cuffed behind her, watching Officer Howard through the partition as he completed his arrest paperwork in the front seat. His movements were routine, practiced. He had done this hundreds of times before. Officer Edmund had remained at the park to question witnesses. Standard procedure for any arrest. Get statements. Establish probable cause retroactively if needed. Build the case that would justify the detention. But this wasn't a standard arrest. 23 minutes passed. Jade counted each one, her FBI training allowing her to maintain absolute calm Despite the indignity of her situation, she thought about Wendy, hoped that another parent had stepped in to comfort her daughter, to explain that sometimes police officers make mistakes. Then Howard's radio crackled to life. "Stephen, we have a problem." Edmund's voice carried an edge of panic that immediately changed the atmosphere in the patrol car. Jade watched Howard stiffen, his pen stopping mid-signature on the arrest report. Multiple witnesses say she was just sitting there. Nobody called in a complaint. The crucial detail landed like a bomb. Dispatch records would show no call had been made, no complaint about suspicious activity, no report of a black female loitering near children. Howard had fabricated the entire justification for the stop. Edmund continued, his words coming faster now. "And Stephen, there's a kid here asking for her mom. Says her mom is a federal agent." Howard froze completely. His hand, still holding the pen, began to tremble slightly. For the first time since the encounter began, uncertainty replaced the arrogance that had defined his every action. "What federal agency?" he asked into the radio, his voice tight. Before Edmund could respond, Jade spoke from the back seat. Her tone was calm, professional, and utterly devastating. "FBI, Special Agent Jade Ross, Civil Rights Division. My credentials are in my purse, which your partner currently has." The color drained from Stephen Howard's face as if someone had opened a valve. He turned slowly to look at her through the partition, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not a suspicious black female. A federal agent who investigated people exactly like him. The silence in the patrol car stretched for several seconds. Howard stared at Jade through the partition, his mind clearly racing through the implications of what he had just learned. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something much closer to panic. "You should have identified yourself," he finally stammered, grasping for any justification that might salvage the situation. Jade's response was measured, deliberate, and built from 12 years of prosecuting cases exactly like this one. "I have no legal obligation to identify myself when being illegally detained. You had no reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. You conducted a racially motivated stop based solely on my appearance. You fabricated a complaint that Dispatch has no record of, and yes, I know Dispatch has no record because your partner just confirmed it. And you arrested me for the crime of asserting my constitutional rights. Rights I've spent 12 years defending in federal court." Each sentence landed like a legal brief. Howard's hands trembled as he reached for his radio, keying it with fingers that no longer seemed entirely under his control. "Dispatch, I need verification on federal credentials. Special Agent Jade Ross, FBI." The response came back within minutes. Jade heard the dispatcher's voice through the partition. "Confirmed. Special Agent Ross, Civil Rights Division, 12 years of service. Advise you also have a priority 1 call from Lieutenant Freeman." Before Howard could respond, his cell phone rang. He answered it with a shaking hand. Even from the back seat, Jade could hear Lieutenant Marcus Freeman's voice, elevated and urgent. The conversation was brief and one-sided. "Yes, sir." "No, sir." "I understand, sir." When Freeman delivered his final order, Howard's face went from pale to ashen. "Release her immediately. Do not say another word to her. Do not attempt to justify your actions. I am en route to your location. You will wait there until I arrive." The call ended. For a long moment, Howard sat frozen, staring at the phone in his hand. Then he exited the vehicle and opened the back door. The handcuffs came off Jade's wrists, without ceremony, without apology, without eye contact. What he didn't know, what he wouldn't know until the lawsuit was filed, was that someone at the park had recorded portions of the arrest on their phone and posted it to social media. The FBI's field office had been contacted within minutes. The machinery of federal oversight was already in motion. Jade retrieved Wendy first, pulling her daughter into an embrace that communicated everything words couldn't. Then she collected her credentials from Officer Edmund, who handed them over while avoiding all eye contact, and gathered her belongings from where they had been searched and catalogued like evidence from a crime scene. But she also retrieved something far more valuable: copies of the body camera footage. Department policy required that anyone arrested had the right to request footage of their detention. Jade made that request immediately, on scene, before Lieutenant Freeman arrived. The request was documented, time-stamped, and legally binding. Howard, still in shock, complied without resistance. Within 3 hours, Jade had secured copies of the complete body camera recordings from both officers. Every word of the confrontation was there. Every escalation. Every constitutional violation. The fabricated complaint about a suspicious person. Howard's admission that the description was simply a black female in the park. The arrest for obstruction when no crime had been committed. She also obtained witness statements from 5 park visitors who had seen the entire encounter. A mother with 2 young children, an elderly couple walking their dog, a jogger who had stopped when she noticed police handcuffing someone. All of them stated the same facts. Jade had been sitting quietly on a bench, watching her daughter play, doing nothing remotely suspicious. Most critically, she requested and received dispatch records proving no complaint had ever been called in. No report of suspicious activity. No concerned citizen calling about a black woman near the playground. The stop had been initiated entirely at Howard's discretion, based on nothing but racial profiling. By Monday morning, Jade had contacted the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. The evidence was catalogued with prosecutorial precision. 7 distinct violations of department policy. The fabricated complaint. The racially motivated stop. The false arrest charges. The use of handcuffs on a non-resisting subject during an illegal detention. When Lieutenant Freeman attempted to schedule a meeting to discuss the incident, Jade's response was professional and final. "This will be handled through proper legal channels. I recommend the department secure all related documentation immediately." Legal experts she consulted that week all said the same thing. This was a textbook civil rights violation, with documentation so complete it could be used in law school curricula. 3 weeks later, Jade filed a federal lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas. The complaint was 47 pages of devastating legal precision. It outlined violations of the Fourth Amendment's protection against unlawful seizure, violations of the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection under law, violations of federal civil rights statutes, specifically 42 U.S.C. Part 1983, which provides a cause of action for constitutional violations by state actors. The damages sought, $3.1 million. The Dallas Police Department's response was immediate and unprecedented in its speed. Officer Stephen Howard was placed on administrative leave within 48 hours of the lawsuit being filed. The internal affairs investigation that followed revealed something that made the department's liability even worse. Howard had been the subject of 12 previous complaints alleging racial profiling over his 9-year career. 12 complaints, all dismissed without proper investigation, all buried in personnel files that Internal Affairs had failed to properly review. Officer Edmund received a 30-day suspension without pay. His violation was different, but equally serious: failure to intervene. Department policy explicitly required officers to stop other officers from violating constitutional rights. Edmund had recognized the stop was illegal. His body language and later statements confirmed this, but had chosen silence over integrity. The FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility launched a parallel federal investigation. The question they examined was whether Howard's arrest of a federal agent constituted interference with federal law enforcement operations. While criminal charges were ultimately not pursued, the finding in their report was unequivocal. Officer Howard's conduct demonstrated a pattern of racial bias that poses a direct threat to federal law enforcement operations and community trust. The dual investigations created an insurmountable legal situation for the city of Dallas. The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was complete. The pattern of ignored complaints established deliberate indifference to constitutional violations. The city's attorneys reviewed the case and delivered their recommendation to the city council. Settle immediately, before this goes to trial, and the damages increase exponentially. 8 months after Jade Ross was handcuffed in front of her daughter, the city of Dallas agreed to a settlement that would reshape the department's policies for years to come. $3.1 million, one of the largest civil rights settlements in the city's history. The case never went to trial because the evidence was simply too strong. The body camera footage alone would have destroyed any defense the city attempted to mount. But it wasn't just the money that mattered. The settlement included mandatory comprehensive reforms that addressed the systemic failures that had allowed Howard's pattern of behavior to continue unchecked. Every arrest in a public space would now require mandatory body camera review by a supervisor within 24 hours. Detention policies were completely revised, with specific training modules on racial bias and constitutional protections. A civilian oversight board was created with actual subpoena power, not the toothless advisory committees that many departments used for public relations. Most significantly, any complaint alleging racial profiling would now require external investigation by an independent agency. And Officer Stephen Howard was terminated without pension eligibility. At 39 years old, his law enforcement career ended completely. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement revoked his peace officer certification, a decision that ensured he could never work as a police officer anywhere in the state. Most other states honored Texas's decertification, effectively ending any possibility of him working in law enforcement anywhere in the country. He lost everything: his career, his pension, his reputation. His name became synonymous with the exact kind of misconduct that Jade had spent her career prosecuting. Officer Edmond accepted a demotion to desk duty. He would never patrol again, never make another street-level arrest. But the department found a use for his failure. He became a mandatory witness in every training program about the duty to intervene, forced to recount his decision to remain silent while his partner violated a woman's constitutional rights. The settlement was announced at a press conference where Jade stood beside her attorney, Wendy, at her side. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply stated facts. This settlement represents accountability, but accountability without reform is meaningless. Jade used the settlement money strategically. A significant portion went into a trust for Wendy's education, college, graduate school, whatever future her daughter chose. But Jade donated over $1 million to organizations that supported mothers who had faced similar profiling but lacked the resources, platform, or legal knowledge to fight back. She became a sought-after keynote speaker on police reform, traveling to conferences and police academies across the country. Her message was consistent. I had 12 years of FBI experience, legal knowledge, and federal credentials. I still got handcuffed for sitting on a bench. Imagine what happens to people who don't have those protections. The park incident became Case Study 447 at the FBI Academy in Quantico. New agents studied the body camera footage, learning to recognize the warning signs of racial profiling, the importance of proper documentation, and the constitutional standards for detention and arrest. Jade's calm, methodical assertion of her rights, captured entirely on camera, became a textbook example of how to document civil rights violations in real time. During the settlement negotiations, Wendy had provided a brief recorded deposition. At 8 years old, she described what it felt like to watch her mother being arrested for no reason. "I thought the police were supposed to help people," she said into the camera, her voice small and confused. "But they hurt my mom. They put handcuffs on her, and she didn't do anything wrong. The recording broke several members of the mock jury during trial preparation. The city's legal team watched grown jurors wipe tears from their faces and immediately recommended settlement. 2 years after the incident, a small bronze plaque was installed at Riverside Park, near the bench where Jade had been arrested. It commemorated the reforms that resulted from the case and included a line that Wendy had insisted on: "Courage is knowing your rights and refusing to surrender them." Stephen Howard never worked in law enforcement again. He never received his pension. His attempts to find work in private security were thwarted by background checks that revealed his termination and decertification. The man who had assumed he had absolute authority over a black woman in a park learned that authority built on bias ultimately collapses under the weight of accountability. Jade Ross returned to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. But now, when she interviewed victims of police misconduct, when she took statements from people who had been profiled and humiliated, she spoke with the authority of someone who had lived it. Her advocacy became even more powerful because it was personal. The $3.1 million settlement stood as a monument to a simple truth: those who abuse power will eventually encounter someone they cannot intimidate. And justice, though delayed, remains inevitable.